Ram Guha, what was your response when you saw footage of the Prime Minister attending a Ganpati Puja at the residence of the Chief Justice of India on Wednesday? How do you view this development?
Well, my first reaction was of dismay and disappointment. Principally, dismay and disappointment at the Chief Justice, because I do not really expect the Prime Minister to observe proprieties. I think the Prime Minister has a very cavalier disregard for institutional autonomy and integrity, has been shown in his behavior in many spheres over the last, in fact, 20 years from his time as Chief Minister of Gujarat onwards. The fact that it was broadcast, that the Prime Minister went to the Chief Justice's house, that physical proximity was shown, conducting a religious function, which may have imputations also of personal proximity, was absolutely unforgivable. Allowing such a flagrant display of his personal proximity to the Prime Minister at this particular event was shocking.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Footage and photographs of the Prime Minister attending Ganpati prayers at the residence of the Chief Justice of India on Wednesday have gone viral and created considerable controversy and great concern in political circles, in the legal fraternity, and also the wider public. So today we ask, have Prime Minister Modi and Chief Justice Chandrachud been misunderstood? Or have they committed what amounts to a terrible mistake, which some call unforgivable? To answer that question, I'm joined by the well-known and highly regarded historian, author, and political commentator, Ramachandra Guha. Ram Guha, what was your response when you saw footage of the Prime Minister attending a Ganpati Puja at the residence of the Chief Justice of India on Wednesday? How do you view this development?
Well, my first reaction was of dismay and disappointment. Principally, dismay and disappointment at the Chief Justice, because I do not really expect the Prime Minister to observe proprieties. I think the Prime Minister has a very cavalier disregard for institutional autonomy and integrity, has been shown in his behavior in many spheres over the last, in fact, 20 years from his time as Chief Minister of Gujarat onwards. But I felt, particularly by having it recorded, that act recorded and broadcast, and in the full knowledge of the Chief Justice. Chief Justice, as we know, is a very intelligent and self-aware man. So he knew exactly what he was doing. So that the publicizing of it brought in my view, disrespect for him. It did discredit to him personally. It diminished his office of Chief Justice, and it also cast a shadow of the institution he heads. The Supreme Court, in fact, he heads the entire judiciary. So I would say the most euphemistic and polite way of putting it in, so to say, legal language, was that it was an extremely injudicious act.
Now, judging by the footage, and I admit the footage could be misleading, this seems to have been a private ceremony with just the Chief Justice's family present. Does that change the way we should see this, or does it make no difference at all?
No, it doesn't. The fact that it was broadcast, that the Prime Minister went to the Chief Justice's house, that physical proximity was shown, conducting a religious function, which may have imputations also of personal proximity, was absolutely unforgivable. As I said, this is what the Prime Minister would want. It's not an accident that the Prime Minister wore Maharashtrian dress, that he went on Ganesh Chaturthi, that Justice Chandrachud is from Maharashtra, and that the Maharashtra elections are just a couple of months away, and that the BJP is believed to be on a weak wicket in this very important state. So that is exactly how one would expect Narendra Modi, who has a completely cynical disregard for propriety, decency, institutional integrity, democratic norms, to behave. But for the chief, for argument's sake, the Chief Justice could have said, it's possible, we don't know whether he invited him or the Prime Minister came, whatever it is, but he saw the cameras, he should have said, keep the cameras away. Now, it's quite interesting, by the way, that it's the same channel, believed to be close to the Prime Minister and the ruling party, which broadcast this, will also broadcast the Chief Justice's previous visits to temples clad in saffron in Gujarat. So, at the very least, the camera should not have been there. And the Chief Justice should have had the wisdom and, dare I say, the courage to tell the camera people to go away while
You
welcoming the Prime Minister, if he wished.
you you used a phrase which I'm going to repeat for the audience because I think it was so important. You called this absolutely unforgivable. And therefore, let me ask you this. In this specific instance, whose lapse of judgment in your mind is greater? That of the Chief Justice of India for inviting the Prime Minister, or that of the Prime Minister for accepting and attending?
Certainly, the Chief Justice's lapse was greater. I've already suggested and explained that we Democrats expect no better from the Prime Minister. If you look at how he treats Parliament, his own party, his cabinet, autonomous institutions, which are always peopled by people of, usually peopled by individuals of dubious integrity and certainly personal or party loyalty, to the Prime Minister. So it's very clear that the Prime Minister has no respect for public institutions, for democratic norms, for niceties, for proprieties. So this is how it would behave. And it was clearly aimed at the Maharashtra election. It may also be aimed at showing, at displaying in a rather brazen way his personal proximity to the Chief Justice. So Chief Justice should not have allowed it. Again, let me underline, even if the Prime Minister was invited along with other people, as soon as the Chief Justice or his wife or his associate, so he would have people with him who would know, would say, tell the camera people, aap bahar jaiye. Absolutely not. Now, because this, it's correct. Again, let me make some important distinctions. A film star wants to be photographed and, doing live things to attract a larger fan base. A cricketer might want to do the same thing. Even a writer like myself may want more publicity to sell his books. A prime minister wants votes, in this case in Maharashtra. But the Chief Justice should beware of publicity. Media attention is the enemy of the judicial integrity and self-respect. Let the Chief Justice's judgments be discussed, if at all. You and I should be discussing something. It should be his judgments. Were they right? Were they appropriate? Could they be nuanced? What does the law say about it? What does precedent say about it? What implications will a particular judgment have? But the consequences of this for the office of the Chief Justice. I think Mr. Chandrachud, as I said, Chief Justice Chandrachud, has done this in full awareness of what will happen. So he doesn't care about his personal reputation.
So what you're
saying, he does not care of the office.
So what you're saying is that the Chief Justice is guilty of two very serious lapses of judgment. First, if he did invite the Prime Minister to his home to attend a Ganpati Puja. And secondly, and arguably even worse, is that he saw that the event was being photographed and filmed, did not object, allowed the filming to continue, and then allowed the film to be made public. Those were two very serious errors of judgment on the part of the Chief Justice.
Both were serious, and the second was infinitely more problematic.
Now, as we've been discussing, and from what I can tell of the footage and the photographs, they seem to have been put out by either Mr. Modi's ex-handle or the Prime Minister's office, if I am correct. Is there a message the Prime Minister is conveying by making this public and by disseminating it so widely?
Of course, that was the intention of his going there. He wanted as much publicity as possible. Again, one doesn't know why, but he clearly wanted as much publicity for this act as possible. The Prime Minister did. One supposes it is largely because of the Maharashtra elections, but also secondarily to brag about and boast about his proximity to the Chief Justice of India.
So did the Chief Justice perhaps unwittingly walk into what might have been a trap?
Look, he should be aware of it. And many people are aware of it, Karan. I mean, I'm a lowly man compared to the Chief Justice. But at a very petty level, similar things happen to me. For example, I'll be in a meeting and some young, ambitious, self-promoting writer will come with a book I've not read and say, I want a photograph of you with my book. At which I'll say, you are welcome to take a photograph with me, but not with your book because it'll appear as if I'm endorsing it. So even a person in a very small position like me knows what is right, what is wrong, what is, so he absolutely given, the dignity of the office, what it means. I also think, and this is a secondary aspect, I think that allowing such a flagrant display of his personal proximity to the Prime Minister at this particular event was shocking. A secondary error or mistake would be it was a religious function of a particular religion. And just before a religion important in Maharashtra, just before the Maharashtra elections. So I think it would have been very easy for the Chief Justice that he did not do it. I'll underline what I've said before, that he did not ask quietly, courteously, ask the camera people to step away, showed a lack of wisdom and a lack of courage.
In 1980, when Indira Gandhi was re-elected, Justice Bhagwati wrote to congratulate her and expressed how pleased he was. BJP circles are now claiming that when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister, he invited Chief Justice Balakrishnan to the iftar party that he held, I think, in 2009, and Chief Justice Balakrishnan accepted. Do these instances suggest that our top judges have frequently lapsed in their conduct, or is the Chandrachud incident of a different order?
So what this suggests is some top judges have lapsed in their conduct. Justice Bhagwati should not have written that letter exalting the achievements and talents of Indira Gandhi after she was re-elected in 1980. Justice K.G. Balakrishnan should have quietly declined to attend the iftar party at Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's house. But this two things. One, this incident is much worse because Bhagwati was not Chief Justice. He was an ordinary justice. He wrote a letter in his personal capacity, which he should not have done. Justice Balakrishnan went for a public event in which many other people were there. This was a one-to-one, a religious ceremony, and, of course, videographed and disseminated. So that's the first thing, that previous luminaries of the court have been guilty of errors of judgment does not excuse this. That's point number one. Point number two, clearly this is a larger error of judgment. And thirdly, we should hold people to the highest standards. I mean, if I may take a name of a person who's still alive, who lives in my hometown, Justice M.N. Venkatachalaya, who is regarded rightly as the great, they call him the Bhishma Pitama of the Indian judiciary. He's a deeply spiritual man. Justice Venkatachalaya does his puja morning and evening. But he would never have allowed this. So absolutely. And he would not, anyone who knows how the best Chief Justices behave, one would have expected Justice Chandrachud, with his own lineage, the son of a Chief Justice, with his scholarly credentials, alumni of Harvard University, to know how to behave better. So, again, as I said, the videography, the Chief Justice conducting a religious ceremony in the company of, in the comradeship of the Prime Minister at a time like this, I think is unconscionable.
I think I'm right in saying that it was Justice Venkatachalaya who once said to a Prime Minister, and I believe that Prime Minister might have been Narasimha Rao, that relationships between the top of the judiciary and the top of the executive should not be cordial, they should be correct.
I'll tell you something else he did. So when the Vajpayee government came to power in, I think it was the second term, 1999, they wanted some RSS or Sangh Parivar hotheads wanted to rewrite the constitution. So, as usual, they have imperfect knowledge. So, someone told them there is Justice Venkatachalaya. He's a deeply pious man. He does 3 hours of puja a day. So, they called him to head the Constitutional Review Committee. And he said, he did a review and said there's nothing need to be stayed with the basic structure. Certainly does not need to be made a Hindu Rashtra. He wrote his report, and the day he submitted his report, Karan, he cleared out of his home in his temporary home in Lutyens, Delhi, and returned to his small flat in Basavangudi in Bangalore. So he did not want to talk about it on the press either. So surely Justice Chandrachud knows about what Justice Bhagwati did. He also knows about how Justice Venkatachalaya conducted himself in private and in public, and he has chosen one route rather than the other.
Let's at this point focus a little sharply on the values and principles that judges are expected to uphold. I'm going to quote from the Restatement of Values of Judicial Life adopted by the Supreme Court on the 7th of May 1997 to mark, I will add, the 50th anniversary of India's independence. And that Restatement of Values says, and I'm quoting, "The behavior and conduct of members of the higher judiciary must reaffirm the people's faith in the impartiality of the judiciary, Accordingly, any act of a judge of the Supreme Court or a High Court, whether in official or personal capacity, which erodes the credibility of this perception, has to be avoided. Has that footage that we've been discussing undermined the people's faith in the impartiality of the judiciary?
Well, it's very polarized. I mean, for example, again, if you look at today's Indian Express, the very distinguished jurist Indra Jaisingh has written an article criticizing what the Chief Justice did. A serving minister of the central government has written an article saying it's all fine. Now, again, this goes back, I'll come to your point in a minute, but this goes back to my earlier point. Should a Chief Justice be in such a position that a sitting minister of the ruling party has to defend him and to bat for him? So what are the optics of that too? A little bit of the optics of what happened, on Wednesday, the afterlife of this. So absolutely, what you read out about judicial contact, this is in clear breach of it, and it's and again, let me underline, Justice Chandrachud is a scholar. He's a very learned, self-aware man. He knew exactly what he was doing, and yet he did it.
Let me quote a second part of that restatement of values of judicial life. It says, and I'm quoting, every judge must at all times be conscious that he is under the public gaze, and there should not be any act or omission by him which is unbecoming of the high office he occupies and the public esteem in which that office is held. Is that public esteem affected by the footage we're discussing?
Yes. So allowing the cameraman to come in for the whole thing to be videographed with him and with Justice Chandrachud and his wife next to the Prime Minister doing a puja was absolutely unbecoming of his office and violative of that, that judicial code of conduct.
You've mentioned in this interview 6 or 7 times the fact that the Chief Justice permitted cameramen and photographers to come in to photograph and film the puja. And you've even called it absolutely unbecoming. That, in a sense, I get the impression, is the worst of all possible lapses by the Chief Justice.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
The others are secondary. The fact that it was a Hindu ceremony, those are all secondary. That's the principle that the publicity was voluntarily and willingly allowed. The Prime Minister said wants it. The Prime Minister wants it. The Chief Justice should have prohibited it.
And this has affected very adversely the public esteem in which his office is held.
And he personally said, so this will, whatever judgments he may pass later, this will go down. It's like just the letter of Justice Bhagwati. Justice Bhagwati did some remarkable things. For example, he introduced public interest legislation for the first time in the court. But forever, this will be a stain on his personal reputation. Of course, it's done great damage to the office too, and to the judiciary and the court. But it will be a stain on his personal reputation and credibility that will never go away.
Now, sadly, this is not the first time Justice Chandrachud has acted in this way. In January, and you and I discussed this at the time, just before the inauguration of the Ayodhya temple, he visited the Somnath and Dwarkadish temples in Gujarat, dressed in a saffron kurta and saffron dhoti. At the time, he gave an interview to the Indian Express where he claimed that he was inspired by the Hindu Dhwaj, which he said binds all of us together. Now, he's invited the Prime Minister to his home for Ganpati prayers, and even worse, permitted it to be videographed and disseminated widely. What message does this behavior send to the judiciary? He heads the judiciary. What message is he sending to judges and magistrates?
It will be interesting to compare those two episodes, which was more egregious, which was a greater transgression of his duties and his oath and the office he holds. I mean, both are equally egregious. Here he had the Prime Minister. There he was going on a private visit, but then he gives an interview claiming that the Hindu Dhwaj embodies, the values of the Constitution. I mean, the Constitution was, the framing was overseen by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who burnt the laws of Manu, and probably for good reasons, because what the laws of Manu say about, Dalits and women and what rights they do not have. So I think both were egregious acts, and both will go down in how history assesses Justice Chandrachud's tenure as Chief Justice.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Let me widen our discussion. In the light of his behavior, both in January and again in this month, September, could questions now be asked about some of his judgments? For example, the Article 370 judgment which found in favor of the government, or the prolonged delay in handling the defection cases in Maharashtra, which brought down the Uddhav Thackeray government. Legitimately, can questions be asked about those?
I will not ask them. Other people might ask them. They may be legitimate, they may not be legitimate. I will not ask them. I will just say that he's going for pilgrimage to temples in Gujarat with his wife was absolutely fine. Allowing it to be filmed was wrong. Going on to claim in an interview that the Hindu Dhwaj represented the values of the Indian Constitution was disgraceful and historically inaccurate, but also very, deeply unfortunate that a Chief Justice would say this. And we've already spoken about the current incident. So I do not want to speculate. I do not want to attribute motives. But what he did then and what he has done now were both have diminished him personally, have diminished his office, have diminished the court he has.
A moment ago, Ram Guha, you said this will be forever a stain on his personal reputation. Has this then, in a sense, become a defining moment in his Chief Justiceship? When people remember and recall him after he's retired, and I point out that he retires in 2 months' time, will people, on the one hand, remember judgments like electoral bonds, Sabrimala, homosexuality, adultery, and then on the other hand, also remember this particular instance?
I am not a legal scholar. I mean, they will assess his judgment. So there's homosexuality and there's electoral bonds. On the other side, there is the Ayodhya judgment, which actually, by all accounts, he wrote. There is others, there's a failure for there's the upholding of Article 370, which in my view, was legally wrong. There's a failure after 5 years to hear, the CAA cases. I mean, the CAA is clearly unconstitutionally, but, problematic, but that people will judge, So, as I said, I don't want to comment on his judgments. I'm not a legal scholar. I'm a historian of Indian democracy who believes that democracies are sustained by the autonomy and integrity of institutions like the Supreme Court. And that is what he has undermined by his actions in January, and even more so by his actions earlier this week.
So he's undermined the integrity of the Supreme Court.
Yes. And of the judiciary more broadly, because if the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court does this, if tomorrow in my state, Chief Justice of the High Court will say, let the Chief Minister come and I'll be photographed doing whatever I want with him. And then the district judge will say, I want the MLA to come and do a puja with him, or, backslap with him and get all the photos taken and videographed. So the judiciary as a whole, he set a very bad example.
In that case, what we're talking about is something that can neither be forgotten nor forgiven.
Well, maybe he'll have a mea culpa. Maybe later on he'll say, I was misguided, I was wrong after he retires. Possibly.
But that's an apology.
Why not? I mean, Mahatma Gandhi once admitted to making a Himalayan blunder.
But are you suggesting that if later on Justice Chandrachud apologizes, accepts that it was a lapse of judgment on his part, then this can be forgotten and forgiven, but not otherwise?
Not forgotten and forgiven, but at least partly extenuated. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I met him only once briefly, so I can't say I know him. So I don't know what he's like, and but certainly the short-term implications of what happened earlier this week diminish him personally, diminish his office, and diminish his court.
Okay, my last question. Do you fear, because of the two instances regarding the Chief Justice, one in January, one in September, both in the same calendar year, do you fear that we could be starting to see the saffronization or the Hindutvaization of our top court, or at least of some very important judges who sit there?
Karan, the saffronization or the Hindutvaization has started. Several years ago, well before Justice Chandrachud became Chief Justice. You know, the collegium recommends names, and then the government holds up names. They hold up names of people who they believe won't be congenial to the RSS point of view, and they fast track the names of those who they believe to be congenial to the RSS point of view. So those who are fast tracked and appointed are more likely to be Chief Justices of High Courts and then be elevated to the Supreme Court. Now, some really outstanding lawyers, 3 or 4 of whom I know personally, because of their principled, moral, intellectual, political independence, have been, their elevation has been delayed by a year, or their appointment has been delayed by a year, 18 months, and so on. And you would also know people like this. So that has happened already. Now, judges, Chief Justice Sadasivan gave a favorable judgment to Amit Shah, and then he retired and was appointed governor of Kerala. Ranjan Gogoi gave a judgment regarded as favorable to the government. He became a BJP or an MP of the Rajya Sabha. So that has already happened. And that is why this is so worrisome, because Justice Chandrachud's actions will encourage this, will give impetus to the ruling party and the Prime Minister and Home Minister to continue to accelerate this process of saffronization. I mean, there was a news report, I think a day or two before the incident we've been talking about in this program, where apparently there was a Vishwa Hindu Parishad event and 30 judges, retired High Court and Supreme Court judges, attended. So this has already happened. And one would expect a person of Chief Justice Chandrachud's learning and scholarship and understanding of legal and constitutional history globally to have tried to put a stop to this, instead of which he has encouraged and furthered it.
One last question, and I ask it because you mentioned that terrible lapse of allowing photographers and cameramen to film and disseminate the presence of the Prime Minister in his home for a puja. Do you think that actually the Chief Justice welcomes the impression and image that he's close to the Prime Minister?
I don't want to speculate. That would be, prudent and unfair, but certainly he should not have allowed it.
Okay.
I do hope that when some time passes and he thinks more coolly, he will come to regret it and possibly in some way atone for it.
Okay, you hope he will regret and even atone.
I hope.
You stop short of apologize.
If you do something in impulse and later on you feel it's wrong, I hope that wisdom dawns on him and that courage dawns on him.
Ram Guha, thank you very much for speaking to me and for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.